Hello and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Dan Moulthrop. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at the City Club and also a very proud member. It's my honor to welcome all of you here to our forum with the Democratic candidate for Ohio Attorney General, David Pepper. At the outset, I should say that today's program is a candidate forum, not a debate, because the incumbent candidate chose not to participate. The campaign of Republican Mike DeWine told us that because there was a joint appearance with the Plain Dealer editorial board and because of other candidate appearances, they felt the public had ample opportunity to get to know both candidates and the issues. As you can imagine, we disagree, and we are disappointed. Should you be interested, however, in seeing the Republican, Mike DeWine, he is appearing at the Akron Press Club next Tuesday at noon. You're invited to go. The office of the Ohio Attorney General is a vital one. It touches all of our lives, regardless of whether we spend any time in a court of law. The progress made in recent years in testing a backlog of rape kits is evidence of this. As these kits are processed and assailants are identified and convicted, our communities are becoming safer. The Attorney General's office also played a key role in upholding and defending Ohio's constitutional ban on same-sex marriage. Those are just two statewide examples of how the office affects our lives. Locally, the AG's office played an important role in the investigation of the police shooting of Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams. And as any business owner or business leader can tell you, the Attorney General's office is incredibly important in ensuring fidelity to Ohio's revised code. David Pepper is the Democratic Party's candidate for this office. Born and raised in Southwest Ohio in the Cincinnati area, he is a former Cincinnati council member and a former Hamilton County commissioner. This is the second time he has run statewide as a Democrat. He ran for state auditor in 2010. Mr. Pepper is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Yale University and a graduate of Yale Law School. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and members of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming David Pepper.
Thank you, Dan. It is really an honor to be here today, and I've been looking forward to it. Whether or not Mike DeWine is courageous enough to be here, I know the tradition of this great place, 102 years of free speech, 102 years of public discussion, and I will say, without spending too much time on it, but I'll spend a little bit of time on it, how disappointing it is that the Attorney General wouldn't dare come here. I think that's a shame. I think it's frankly an embarrassment. I think it really lets down the voters. My staff will tell you I love debating. I think it's a lot of fun. Even when people aren't saying nice things about you, this is what the job is. And I think it's especially peculiar that this is the job. You're not just running for any job, you're running to be the Attorney General. What do attorneys do? They stand up and make their case. And so it's terrible for democracy. I'll talk about that in a second. But of all the jobs to have someone afraid to stand and make their case, the Attorney General, that really worries me. What kind of an attorney is afraid to stand up and make their case? So I think it makes you question sort of the broader job description and the person's ability to meet it if they're not willing to stand up and make the case, because everyone knows that that's what attorneys are supposed to do every day. I will say this idea that, well, we went and talked to the editorial board. You know, call me crazy, but I don't remember people talking about that famous Nixon-Kennedy editorial board interview. That's not really the history that we talk about, or that great interview where Reagan told Mondale he wouldn't pick on his inexperience. So the idea that Mr. DeWine says, well, we had a good interview with an ed board. You go to those interviews because you want their editorial board endorsement. That's why he goes. Well, I want the support of the voters also, so I'm willing to go to the voters and make my case. To hide behind flimsy excuses like that is even worse. But I want to say bigger picture than just this bizarre turn in the last month that almost no one wants to debate. It worries me more deeply than just individual debates. And this goes back to your tradition. We're talking about some real broader undermining of our democracy in Ohio. And this is just the last part of it. We have seen in the last couple years the gerrymandering of districts. So every election's outcome is virtually predetermined. We have seen an effort to knock third parties off the ballot that is really unbelievable and should be more of a focus of the media, where they first tried to change the signature requirements, and then once they were struck down doing that, They've been doing everything they can to keep the law on the ballot, going so far the judge in the case, believe it or not, this should be a scandal. The judge, the person who John Husted picked to be the administrative judge in the case that knocked the libertarian off the Attorney General's ballot, at the very moment he was that administrative judge, he was also serving as a lawyer for Mike DeWine. And he's still waiting on that case and knocked Mike DeWine's opponent off the ballot. So they're attacking third parties. The Attorney General was running around the state for the last couple of years. He has never found one offense to the voting rights of our citizens that he's been willing to speak up against. But he's been in court for a year and a half fighting because he's troubled that the rule against lying in ads violates the First Amendment. Never once has gotten worried about the voting rights of our citizens, but boy, if you mess with the politician's right to lie, he's in court refusing to defend that law and saying it's unconstitutional. So he wants to have a rule where we lie in ads. We know what's happened with Citizens United. We know, and I won't go through all the details today, that people now are raising money not by convincing people to, through a democratic process, contribute because they actually agree with them, but you just go to your donors and your vendors and you tell them to give a certain amount and they give it. We all know last week, we were supposed to be voting on Tuesday. Now that's not happening. So you got all this happening to undermine the basics of democracy, and the final step of it all, you've made it harder for third parties. You raise money through ways that are inappropriate. You make voting harder. You predetermine most outcomes. And then when it actually comes down to it and citizens want to hear from the two candidates, that's when you walk away. This is a horrible precedent we're setting for our democracy in Ohio, the swing state for the country. I think it's embarrassing. I think the whole pattern here is embarrassing. And I'll tell you one final thing, and then I'll move on. You know, it's also just tells you everything you need to know. The Attorney General eagerly, with all the energy in the world, was filing briefs with the Supreme Court over the weekend, spending a whole lot of time and money because he was so threatened by the fact that people were going to vote Tuesday. He's working as hard as he can. He did the same thing six months ago on Hobby Lobby. Goes to the Supreme Court to go to bat for a Minnesota corporation, but he can't even bother to show up in Cleveland and actually defend his record. But he's off filing briefs to stop voting. That tells you a whole lot about the priorities, folks. So one of the things, I'll talk, there's so many issues, and you mentioned it, Dan, there's so many important issues in this Attorney General's office that affect lives. But one of the things I will fight for, both within the job description more broadly, is to go back to a day where we actually treat our democracy seriously. And we have competitive races. And we show up and make our case. And I almost felt like bringing up that Clint Eastwood stool just to make the point. But it's just, to me, a sad state of affairs when you add up all the things that are being done to undermine our democracy. And maybe the last great offense is that even at the Cleveland City Club, 102 years, the guy running for the top attorney's job in the state can't even show up. So I think you know how I feel about that. I'll move on. But I appreciate being here. I still have looked forward to it. I like to talk about this job everywhere I go, and I'm happy to do it with you today. So as Dan said, there's so many issues to talk about. And you'll be glad to know I'm not going to go through all of them. My hope is that those that you're particularly interested in, we can talk about during a Q&A. But we really have, I think, one thing that is clear is that we have a dramatic contrast in candidates in this race. Dramatic. I'm asked all the time, what are you going to do first? There are a lot of things to do. I'll talk about them, but I'll just simply say we have so many challenges here in Ohio. Challenges that are not addressed. Some things may be going better than others, but big picture, we have huge challenges in the good news, and this is why I seek this job. And I entered public service years ago in Cincinnati because I wanted to make a difference in my hometown that was struggling. That's why I'm running for this office. This job can make a huge difference on so many issues, and boy, there are a lot of issues to talk about. The heroin crisis is obviously front of mind for all 88 counties. So little helpful is being done on it. In fact, the state's going the wrong way, folks. The state literally, in the last 3 years, in our plan to deal with heroin is more treatment, more prevention, smarter and tougher enforcement. The state's doing all three of those the wrong way right now. In July, they actually reduced treatment. They made an across-the-board cut in a federal grant so that counties across the state who already don't have nearly enough treatment, if any, had to reduce their federal spending by 30%. Mr. DeWine has overseen the decrease in officers in schools that provide prevention. That office under Cordray funded 380 of those officers who could provide a good influence on kids, keep them from making that first bad decision. That number is down to 220. And we all know that the street strength and firefighter strength around the state, because of the state local government fund cuts, have also been dramatically reduced. The state is not only not doing the right things on the heroin crisis, there is no plan to speak of. It's actually been going the wrong way. It tells you everything you know about the current Attorney General that yesterday, and if this weren't so serious, it'd be laughable, but it is serious, so it's not laughable. He called together, he's so far behind on this issue, years behind. Yesterday, they had the first meeting of something they called the Overdose Prevention Task Force. They had it yesterday. We're years into this crisis. Up to 1,000 people dying a year, 17 a week, and they had their first meeting yesterday. That tells you everything you need to know. That's the kind of issue this job can deal with. This job can make a big difference for good jobs in the state. I've talked about how there are a lot of practices out in the workplace that undermine workers. People not even paying the minimum wage. People not paying prevailing wage when they're supposed to. People misclassifying workers in a way that allows them to avoid paying overtime or even avoid paying their taxes. If you let that stuff happen for years on end, and the employers who do it get away with it, you create a system like we have in our state where wages are stagnant because employers who don't follow the rules in a competitive world beat out the ones who do follow the rules. And one of the jobs of the Attorney General is to say, no, we want to create a marketplace that provides a level playing field for those who do the right thing by their workers. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of the economy. Big issue also, the new economy. How do we compete for jobs in the 21st century? A lot this job can do there. A big issue, how do we keep young people in our state? It all starts with the new economy and good jobs and revitalizing our cities. We'll do a lot there. I'm very concerned. If you look at most of the worst decisions out of Columbus or in government, you can track almost all of them back to some level of pay-to-play or corruption in decision-making. The most clear case study of that is the charter school system. And I say that knowing, and I have friends who around the country, friends of mine who have started fantastic charter schools. So I don't want to say every single charter school is a problem. But my friends who started their charter schools, they're nonprofit charter schools. My friends aren't millionaires. And they didn't enter the charter school area to become millionaires. They cared about kids. What we have in Ohio is a debacle where millions of public dollars are going to charter schools that are absolute failures. And those millions go to the pockets of the people who start those schools instead of going to good educations. And I've been to forums where people ask, why don't the legislators pay attention to the data and see that these schools are failing? And the answer is, those aren't the statistics they're looking at. It's a pay-to-play system, and we've put up education for sale. And the reason I bring up charter schools is if we're willing to sell the most important thing we do, education, to the highest bidder, that tells you how serious our pay-to-play is corrupting our politics in Ohio. What's the best job to crack down on pay-to-play? The Attorney General of Ohio. This is the job that can bring a model of high integrity back to government. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, and without going into too many details, there's a reason Mike DeWine doesn't do that stuff, because he does pay-to-play as bad as any office in the state. I could show you data. You'll be glad I won't do it today. I normally have charts and graphs with me. We're talking millions of dollars. Often the money comes the same day or week as the proposal from the law firm for work. There's absolutely no system in place to actually measure the quality of the proposal. There's 3 years without one literally written recommendation to Mike DeWine about how to pick firms. Apparently he memorizes it all. There's no paper trail. We even have a company that literally created itself 2 days before a bid was announced. It was a friend of DeWine's and a donor. Never before did the work. Competed against national competition. 23 days after it created itself, submitted a proposal that admitted it had never done the work, wins the bid over national competition. 6 months after it won the bid, this company was sending emails back to the Attorney General's office. It's a collection. This is collections work, collecting unpaid taxes or debt or other things. They sent an email back to the Attorney General's office saying, we've attached all the files that we're unable to collect because we don't have licenses to do collections. in other states. They were unqualified 6 months after they were picked. No wonder collections fell for the first year in a decade after these kind of decisions were made. So we have an office that can't do its job of cracking down on pay to play because it violates all the rules. And we'll clean that up. So these are some of the big issues, and we talked about voting issues. I will not be the guy running around like Mike DeWine, literally going to bat for unconstitutional laws. I'll stand up to them. And I'll go so far, and it's in a proposal, and you go to my website, you'll see it. I've proposed creating a voter protection unit. The whole world is watching us. The whole country watches us. Let's make sure we have good lawyers in this office who can guide the legislature on, imagine this, not violating the Constitution. How about we have people who are, if you've lost, they lost until the recent horrible decision by the Supreme Court. They had lost 5 straight cases. 5 straight times this state has been found to have violated the constitutional rights of its citizens over the last 3 years, of libertarians, as I mentioned, of others. At a certain point, when you lose 5 straight major cases, the whole world watching, you ask, is there a lawyer in the House anywhere? Who's given this advice? It's supposed to be the Attorney General. He clearly is struggling with this. We will put into place a voter protection unit that actually does the right thing and stands up to voter intimidation, gives the legislature the advice they need on how not to violate the Constitution. So we'll proactively tackle that. So there are many, many issues, and I won't go through any more. You'll be glad to know. Let me just tell you, most of these are not being addressed by the Attorney General right now in any serious way. The heroin crisis maybe being the most blatantly obvious. Why? He's spending far too much time on something else. He likes using this office for political ends. We don't have a plan for the heroin crisis, but Mike DeWine spent 3 years suing all over the country to stop birth control. He was the lead lawyer, the lead attorney general in the country, filing the main brief with the Supreme Court, along with the Michigan Attorney General. 17 others signed it. It was written in Ohio to side with Hobby Lobby. He went to Arizona to defend an Arizona law that was unconstitutional. He's running around the country. You want to see Mike DeWine eager and energetic, have people voting on Tuesday. That's when he gets to work. That's when he gets fired up. That's when he spends your money, every dollar he can find, to go to court and win the case. But he couldn't show up at court just a few months ago on a major charter school case that affected all of our millions of tax dollars. So you want to see what he spends his time and energy on. It's the Hobby Lobby cases. It's the Michigan company that, just like Hobby Lobby, didn't want to pay for birth control. He went to Michigan and went to bat for them. He went to Nebraska as a plaintiff. So the reason I believe this office isn't doing nearly the things it should be doing on all these issues is because he's off using it for far more political reasons, which I think is completely inappropriate. Let me talk, though, about the major point I want to mention today, and then we'll open it up. Today is the first day of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And in the last few weeks, I think our country has been reminded of just how far we have to go. Not just that there's too much violence, but that our culture is still so willing to turn the other way in the face of that violence. And I think this is an enormous role the Attorney General should be playing and isn't today, to really, in a proactive, comprehensive way, take on that issue. And I just want to pause for a second on the whole NFL Ray Rice situation. And obviously, we all wish it was the NFL that was where this was contained. We all know that's not. It's everywhere. But the fact that the tape of the actual violence was what woke everyone up, and not the tape of a woman who was unconscious being dragged out of an elevator, which somehow wasn't the biggest deal in the world, tells us everything. Somehow, and again, I wish this was contained just to a sports league. But too often, in so many ways, that's the problem right now. All the obvious signs and scars and stories of domestic violence still don't get this country, this state, taking it nearly as seriously as it should. And so that case symbolized, I think, much more than just a problem in a sports league. And one of the things, and we've seen that problem here in Ohio. Every day you see it. You see it on the news. You see it in very high-profile cases like Steubenville. You see it in many ways with the Cleveland kidnapping up here. You see it in the fact that rape kits sat on shelves for decades, untested, accumulating dust. And this job, to me, it shouldn't just be like the NFL, reacting when the problem happens. It should be proactive. And so I'm very proud to have laid out a plan to do that. Now, the only problem with my plan was that I was going to lay it out about 4 months ago up here, and I had driven all the way to Akron, and my wife called me up and told me she was about to deliver. So I turned around in Akron all the way back home. So I've been waiting to represent it to people, and this is a great opportunity, but it is something that continues to be, and I note today in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, or yesterday, obviously continues to be an enormous issue with Tim McGinty, working very hard and saying, yes, we've made some progress, but we got to do more. And that's what I'm saying, and that's what this office needs to do. So I just want to talk about a couple key points of this. But the point is the Attorney General should be leading the way with a proactive, comprehensive plan to help prevent domestic violence and violence against women, to help change a culture that too often looks the other way, and to be much more compassionate and quick to help the victims of these terrible crimes. And that's what I want to talk about today, and that's what we've been talking about all campaign. I'll just mention a few of the things that we proposed, and I'm proud that an expert who I've been talking to about this for a while said she thinks this is an unprecedented plan we've laid out. A lot of states have moved to broaden their domestic violence laws. We need to do that in Ohio. To capture other forms of coercion that really do amount to violence and abuse, but right now that the law doesn't capture. Missouri has done that. I think Ohio needs to take that on. We have a problem in Ohio, and I've had officers bring this to my attention. You know, it actually violates federal law for an abuser to have a gun in the home. But it doesn't violate state law. And so I've had sheriff's deputies and other police officers tell me, we know they're violating the law, but we feel like we've got to call the U.S. Marshals in to do something about it. And boy, do we hate leaving a scene where we know there's a gun in the home of someone who's not supposed to have one, and we call the marshal hoping they'll come back later. That doesn't feel right. I think Ohio needs to deal with that. Strangulation is itself a felony, explicitly a felony in many other states. It's not that in Ohio, believe it or not. Many other states, 29, have updated their laws because it's one of the most clear precursors to a fatal domestic violence incident. It does untold damage, but it's not explicitly defined as its own crime in Ohio. I think that needs to change. There's been a whole series of cases where I think this is, again, something the legislature could take up. There's been a series of cases where there's been a debate about what constitutes notice for TRO, temporary restraining order. And there have been women who explained to the person attacking them they had a TRO, but courts have found, well, the law doesn't quite say that's good enough. We need to redefine the law so that you don't have to have the formal delivery of the notice for the person to feel constrained by that TRO and held accountable if they violate it. That's another big change. I'm just mentioning these because there's so many things if you had a proactive attorney general. There's so many things we could do to help women and help prevent domestic violence that we simply aren't doing. There's modern technology. There's the specialized dockets that some places use so that you have judges who really know this stuff, and it's not part of a much bigger docket that day. We need to look at all those kind of solutions, and that's something I'm committed to doing when I get there. I also am very troubled by one particular aspect of the case in Steubenville. And this comes back to this culture of looking the other way. And that is that it is a crime in Ohio to witness a felony and not report it. That's a misdemeanor. If you see something happening, if you see abuse of a woman, if you see a violent attack on a woman, everyone in Ohio needs to know you call the police. You don't, and this is what happened. This was, in the end, there's a lot of controversy in Steubenville, but 3 young men watched that happen. They didn't call the police. They tweeted about it. They laughed about it. They took photos of it. And we need to make clear, and I will make clear, and by the way, those 3 young men were told by Mr. DeWine, you didn't commit a crime. And he was wrong. I can't think of a worse message to have sent, that in the face of violence, when you have a duty to report it, that he said, well, you might not have behaved great, but you didn't commit a crime. Actually, you did. And I think we need to set a standard from the Attorney General Why were those 3 young women saved here in Cleveland? I can't remember his last name, Charles Ramsey? Because he saw something, he did something about it. And that's why they were found. And when we have a culture that too often looks the other way when the violence is happening, it just goes on and on. And I think you need an Attorney General who says very clearly, no, that's not going to be our approach in Ohio. If you see something happening, you report it. You don't have to necessarily intervene. That's not what the law says, but the law does say you have to report it. You don't just watch it. And that's something we can change. I'm very concerned, but I'm also very happy to see the president and the vice president pushing so hard to make our college campuses safe for young women. I want to do the same thing. The Attorney General represents all these campuses. And it's clear, you look at the dozens of lawsuits all around the country where these campuses are not doing the right thing to prevent violence or to respond to complaints or allegations of violence. And something I want to do as Attorney General is make sure that we, in our representation of all these universities, we work with all of them to make sure they understand the law and what they're supposed to do, and also the best practices to make sure young women on all our college campuses are safe and feel safe. They shouldn't be worrying about this when they're just trying to get their education and go to work. And by the way, one other key part of this, and this is important, you probably know, but a lot don't. We also have in the office a civil rights section and an employment law section in the Attorney General's office. And I can't think of 2 better places to also be a leader on issues of violence against women and harassment against women in the workplace. Because in the employment law section, we're the one who are supposed to advise all the state agencies on how to not break the law when it comes to harassment or discrimination in the workplace, so we will use that proactively. And the civil rights section is one where we're supposed to actually take action when women have been discriminated against, whether it be equal pay or discrimination in the workplace. So we'll take both of those roles and make them much more serious than they are today. And finally, I just want to talk about an issue that has come up a lot. And I've always, you find quickly in these political atmospheres that whenever you suggest improvements, everyone characterizes it as you're attacking the other guy. I want to be very clear. I commend Mike DeWine for beginning to test those rape kits. That was the right thing to do. That was a good thing to do. They sat on shelves for decades, and to begin to test them was the right thing to do. But we can do them a lot faster. And especially since actually it's working. We should do it a lot faster. We know now that by testing these old rape kits, we're actually finding women the justice they've waited for decades for. And we're getting people off the street that need to be locked up because they committed a horrific crime. And we're making our community safer. So if we know that this process works, why in the world would we resist common sense ideas to make it go faster? And every time I bring this up, people, well, he's done a great job and he started it. Yes, he did. But government is not just about good intentions, folks. It's about management and execution and results. And we have now learned that thousands and thousands of rape kits are all over the state. Every month for the last 11 months, more rape kits have come to the Attorney General's office than they have tested. So when I first started talking about it being too slow, the number was around 1,800, and I was told, David, you're being ridiculous. He's doing great. This is a laughable concern. Mike DeWine said it was laughable that I brought this up. I didn't think it was funny at all. It was 1,800 or so then. There are now more than 4,000 on shelves in the Attorney General's office. There are thousands more all over the state. We don't know how many. Tim McGinty thinks there's a lot more coming. And so all I have said is if there are thousands in the office today and thousands more out there, testing 300 a month is just not going to cut it. This is not just responding to any old small thing. The fact that these kits were on shelves for decades is an outright injustice. It was like those videos we talked. It was turning the other way. Clear evidence of crimes. And so to ignore those for 20 years, let's not respond to it like it's just any other bureaucratic, automatic pilot process. It's bigger than that. It's more important than that. The injustice is greater than the response we're seeing. So my proposal is pretty common sense, and I've done this work as a commissioner. I shared services. There are local labs all over the state who know how to do the same work. Let's partner with them. Let's not compete with them. Let's partner with them. The coroner in Hamilton County said she'd want to work with me if I were when I'm Attorney General to get this done. Dayton has a great crime lab. They can do this. So let's share the work and send some resources their way to get these done at far more than $300 a month when we know there are thousands out there. It just makes good sense. And for the life of me, I have no idea, except for people get stubborn in politics, why people won't just take up what is a very common sense idea. In fact, it's such a common sense idea that in 2011, when Mike DeWine had a backlog he was concerned with, I have the contract not with me today, in July of 2011, he reached an agreement with the Hamilton County coroner to test a backlog that he had. So it's been done before. This is not some crazy new idea. And I wanted to say, you know, I think Tim McGinney's a great model for this. He has done great work on this issue. But knowing that he can go faster, he said, I don't want to have a backlog through September 2018. I want to end it in February of 2017, so I'm going to go to the city council to get more money to get this done. He's not saying he did something wrong. He's saying, I got something started, it's going too slow, let's speed it up. Good for him. Well, that's what the Attorney General should be saying. He shouldn't be saying, if it weren't for me, there wouldn't have been any kids tested. We're not objecting to that. But speed it up. Justice demands it, and it just, to me, is an issue that is such a low-hanging fruit to get really important work done on such a fundamental issue. There are obviously a lot more issues. Right now, there's very little online access to help victims. Young women, I think the first thing they'll do these days is go online to see how to get help. If you went to the Attorney General's office website today, you'd see almost nothing that actually guides women of how they get help. There's also not nearly enough out in a lot of counties of service as well. So big picture, I hope it's clear. This is an issue I'm very passionate about. It's an issue that's very important. It's a perfect example where you have an Attorney General now who's doing a couple things, but I think there's so much more that we can do on this issue. And I'm thrilled, frankly, to work with you all when I get there, because the first thing I want to do is actually not just myself talk about it. I want to have a group of advocates, of women in a room talking about this and helping me go through all the plans I've talked about and others and really work through every single way that we can do a better job proactively on dealing with this very important issue. So that's one example of many issues that this job can do better. But this is one in particular that I think, given the news we're seeing in the national conversation, but especially the last 3 years, Ohio has been at the center of too many of these cases. And I think we got a lot of work to do right in our home state to deal with this issue in a much better way than we have so far. So I think that's all I have to say until we open up to questions. But thank you all very much for being here. It's great to see so many friends and meet some new folks. Thank you. Thanks. Well done. Thanks.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're enjoying a special forum with Ohio Attorney General Democratic candidate David Pepper. We'll return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club Q&A, and we encourage you to formulate your questions for our speaker now. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via our live webcast, which is supported by the University of Akron. Be sure to tune into our Friday forums on 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. On October 3rd, that's this Friday, in 2 days, the City Club welcomes Ann Neal. She's the president of the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, and she'll be here to discuss political correctness and the problems for academic freedom. For more information about that program or any of our upcoming forums or our past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. Today's forum is sponsored by the Northeast Ohio Media Group, the City Club sponsor of all our politics and policy programming. We thank you very much for your support. Today we also welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party and the Human Rights Campaign. Thank you very much for your support. Now, it's time for your questions. Holding our microphone today is Teddy Eisenberg, our content associate. Let's have our first question, please.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi. I'm taking you up on not asking a question, but making a statement, because this has been bothering me for a long time. Attorney General DeWine likes to have us think that he discovered all these rape kits and the numbers of the enormous numbers of rape kits that have been sitting latent in these offices. But it really was the women's movement that brought attention to this before he discovered it. And many states realized, because they did a study, there were videos that were plastered all over the country. The cover of Ms. Magazine had a feature story on how many rape kits were sitting on shelves. And so he's just responded as many other states had to respond once those numbers were revealed. And it was the work of the women's movement and women that brought that to everybody's attention. And I wanted to make that statement so he doesn't take credit for all the stuff that women have been doing all over the country. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say this also. I will credit, and people criticize journalism a lot these days, the Plain Dealer actually deserves a lot of credit because they really focused on this. And I think that is also what got his attention. But again, I don't want to take away the fact that he did respond. It took decades too long as a community, as a state. But my view is you don't just do things in government. Check it off the list. We've done that. And that's kind of what I'm sensing right now. We did that next. Next being going to court to battle for Hobby Lobby, or next being going to court to go after the fact that we were voting on Tuesday. This is not just something you check off as if it's taken care of when you know there are thousands out there. I think in the end, I'm just a lot less patient with 300 a month when there are thousands out there than he is, and I will do everything I can to speed that up. But thanks for clarifying that.
Tell me what you think the Attorney General can do on matters pertaining to immigration.
There's actually there's some things that the Attorney General cannot do, and there's obviously a lot of national issues there that the Attorney General cannot do. But I also think there are a lot of things that the Attorney General can do. And I've actually had several very good meetings with a number of immigration lawyers that just ask them for their advice. A couple things that are most, I think, troubling. One is, this is obviously, there's a major consumer protection role with attorneys general. One of the worst types of fraud out there is immigration services fraud. People who take people in let's say, difficult status, and they go to them and they say, give us some cash, we'll solve your problems. And those people fork over whatever money they have, and that person was a scam artist. And then this person who's already worried about their status has nowhere to turn, and they also have lost their money. So it's a crime where the victim is far more vulnerable and isn't comfortable going forward. And one of the things in the consumer protection role I'd like to play is to have this office really crack down on this level of fraud that we are seeing more and more of, with horrible consequences of it. Because of it. Another big issue is, and again, sometimes those who have immigrated or are here are more vulnerable in a lot of ways. Another way they're more vulnerable is victims of crime. And there is a particular type of visa that a person can get if they are an immigrant and a victim of crime. And I want to make it clear that they should be comfortable coming forward to this office if they've been a victim of crime, a woman, back to domestic violence, who's been a victim of violence, not thinking by reporting that crime they're going to somehow get deported. And all of a sudden you have another circumstance where people who are victims feel like they can't do anything, which in the end makes them more vulnerable to crime in the first place. And this is an office that, because it's a law enforcement agency, can provide what is called a lieu visa to help help folks know that if they're a victim of crime, you come forward. We don't want you to be a victim. We don't want you not to report it because you're worried what else might happen. So those are two areas. I mean, there are a lot of other things that we can do, but those are two areas in particular that are very relevant, and this office can have a direct role in. Yeah?
So much for being here at the City Club. One of your earlier comments in your presentation, I think, raised some curious issues that I'd like your thoughts on whether and how a lawyer who is a current candidate can or should be filing briefs about voter rights, right, voting hours, and voter eligibility. Thank you.
This is in many ways the most important question of any Attorney General, which is, when do you represent the politicians and when do you represent the people? Because in the end, they're both the client. Yes, you represent, if I'm elected, I represent the Secretary of State, whoever that person may be. Little plug, I support Nina Turner. I hope it's Nina Turner. Same with all the other offices. I will represent a gerrymandered legislature. No shock, it'll be Republican. So I have a duty to represent them, but I also, the first thing I do as Attorney General is take an oath to the Constitution. That's the first thing I do. And when I take that oath, at least, and I don't know if Mr. DeWine just doesn't see it this way, I do, I'm taking oath to uphold and defend the rights of our citizens. And so the balance and the reason I think this should be an elected position, not an appointed one, is you want someone in this office who has the discretion, not as their political view, not as their personal view, but as a matter of law and the Constitution, to know the following, to say the following to the legislators, which I will say. Guys, and it is mostly guys, but folks, I represent you and I will do it vigilantly. But if you pass laws that violate the Constitution, and I have told you in advance that they violate the Constitution, and they clearly do, and you go forward anyway, by the way, this is what's happened over and over and over again. Now, DeWine never told them this, that's the problem. I will say to them, if you cross that line when I've told you as a matter of law you're violating the Constitution, don't count on me to be in court bailing you out, because that's not my job. If you are hell-bent on violating the rights of our citizens, and I've taken an oath to the Constitution, I may find you counsel, but you'll find me in court actually filing a brief explaining that what you're doing is absolutely unconstitutional, because that's my job. And you know what? If we had had an attorney general in the last 3 years who understood that principle, now he only understood it in one case, the right to lie. That's the only time where he has said, hold on a second, I sense maybe a potential constitutional violation. Politicians won't get to lie in their TV ads. I will now file a brief separately. That's the only time he's done it. All these other ones, what has he done? He's never once told the legislature when they were close or over the line of violating constitutional rights. He didn't say to them what I would have said, wait a second, you're literally trying to tell this state that you think libertarians should need 30,000 signatures when the rest of us only need 1,000? Are you really proposing that? Do you know how quickly that will be shot down in court? He never said that. I actually believe that by being so partisan that he's not bold enough to say that, he's actually being a really bad lawyer. What happens under his approach, he never says a word. He has no voter protection unit like I proposed. He lets them pass these crazy, goofy laws that are unconstitutional from the start. The 2014 early vote law that was struck down a few months ago, not the current one being debated, was struck down for the exact same reason the one in 2012 was struck down. They didn't even fix the problem that the judge had written about in 2012. When the judge struck it down, he literally said, see my prior opinion, you did the same thing wrong. That's how bad the lawyering is here. He never once has said to them, here's how you fix the law, and he's never told them, hey, if you violate my advice and you violate the Constitution, I'm not going to defend it. I believe if you had a proactive lawyer saying that, and this is what good lawyers do, you probably wouldn't have had so many losing cases in the first place, because they'd actually listen to you because you're being their lawyer. If you were a company and you lost, if the Cleveland Plain dealer was found in the last 3 years 5 times to have libeled people and lost every case in court, they'd start wondering who their lawyer was and why they're getting such bad advice. We need to do that here in Ohio on this issue. But he doesn't understand, I think, either the Constitution or he doesn't understand his role, which is when push comes to shove, when the politicians are hell-bent on violating the Constitution, your responsibility to just defend whatever unconstitutional stuff they're doing goes away, and your responsibility in a basic check and balance system of standing up for constitutional rights kicks in. That's a huge difference between both of us. It doesn't happen very often. I may be in court defending many things I don't agree with. Just to be clear, my job is not just to litigate my personal views. I'll probably be in court sometimes and people here will say, David, I can't believe you're doing, well, I'm defending something that I may not agree with, but I'm supposed to defend, but I will never be in court defending things that I know are violations of the Constitution. Other questions? Sorry if I get a little fired up sometimes.
Hi, first of all, I want to say that I'm very pleased that the Human Rights Campaign has endorsed you in your running for Attorney General. It's a big step that a national organization is doing that at the state level.
Thank you.
My comment is, my question is, can you make a few comments about the Employment Non-Discrimination Act here in the state?
Sure, thank you. I certainly support it. And I think that this is something I've tried to explain all over the state when I have a chance. I view a lot of these issues as a lawyer, and I believe the ban is unconstitutional. I think Mr. DeWine is pursuing an unconstitutional course, trying to literally eliminate. I mean, think about this. He is right now in court, the Sixth Circuit, with all the gusto and money that you're paying for all this, to eliminate a marriage from a death certificate of a man who died a year ago. So I think as a matter of law, we need to support non-discrimination in the workplace. I think we need to support equality in all other ways. And I will do that. And one of the things that most inspires me to run so fiercely for this office is Mr. DeWine's very extreme approach on these issues. I have a survey here that I want you to know, this goes beyond marriage. This goes beyond marriage. Not only does he not support the anti-discrimination laws and the kind you're talking about, I have a survey that Mr. DeWine took a couple months ago. You remember that case out of Arizona, the law that they passed that said you shouldn't have to serve people you don't like, basically, or you don't agree with? The bakery didn't want to serve, I think, a wedding cake for a gay marriage or something. Remember how even John McCain and Mitt Romney said that's an outrageous law? And we can't, and even, of all people, Jan Brewer vetoed it. So that kind of law is called a conscience law, right? You don't make people do things that violate their conscience. And they put those laws forward because they don't like anti-discrimination laws. And I'm very proud that in Cincinnati, we actually repealed a law that basically would not allow any protection against discrimination. And now, like 40-something other cities in Ohio, we have an anti-discrimination law that says you can't discriminate. Well, Mr. DeWine was asked on a survey in Cincinnati just a few months ago the following question. Even after Jan Brewer and Mitt Romney and John McCain said, get rid of that horrific law in Arizona, you're going to chase away half the businesses that ever want to come here. Mr. DeWine was asked, first he was asked, do you support the union of one man and one woman as the only definition of marriage that should be legally recognized at all levels of government? He said yes, of course. So he likes to say, I have to defend this. In a survey, he said, I want to defend it. He still wants to go back and reverse the Supreme Court decision that said the federal definition isn't just between a man and a woman. That was struck down. He's still saying he believes that. The next question tells you even more just how extreme he is. Because unlike Jan Brewer and John McCain and Mitt Romney, when Mike DeWine was asked, as Attorney General, now that's my words, this is the question, would you work actively to revoke any such laws, regulations, or ordinances that infringe upon an individual's or organization's rights of conscience? That's the Arizona law they're asking about. Will you take on anti-discrimination laws? His answer was yes. So this marriage equality battle isn't the end for him. He's literally committed in writing, signed it, saying, I'm even going to tackle the laws that cities like Cincinnati have passed that said you can't discriminate in housing or restaurants or you name it based on LGBT status. That's as extreme as it gets. That's beyond Jan Brewer, folks. Unless he wants to take back this survey, that's what he agreed to. No, so I have real issues, as you can tell, with his positions on this as a matter of law. But let me also pivot to one final thing on this, because I think even beyond law, and this is, I think, the best way to talk about this with people who may not completely agree with what I'm saying. And I mentioned this in the beginning. The most important thing, I believe, of all the things I've talked about that we can do in the state of Ohio, if we're going to succeed, is convince young people to move here and stay here. The millennials. That's the battle of the new economy. Who attracts the millennials? Is it Boston? Is it New York? Is it Indiana? Is it California? Or is it Ohio? And if they don't come here, all the tax incentives in the world will never get them here. We'll never get the companies here if the talent isn't here. And so as I told the the Ohio Chamber of Commerce when they interviewed me, and I knew I wasn't getting their endorsement, are there any issues out there that you think in the country will affect business in Ohio? I said, yeah, marriage equality will. Because you all, and I didn't want to assume anything, some of you may not understand this issue in the way that young people do. Some of you may be against it, but I'm telling you, the young people we need here, that you're trying to hire, the millennials that we want to keep here or attract here, the ones that Procter & Gamble and the Limited and the Cleveland Clinic need, they don't get why you're against it. And they're not going to go into any state when New York and Indiana and Utah and Kentucky are tearing down the walls of discrimination against them or their friends. And we keep ours up, and we have an attorney general who's fighting as hard as he can to eliminate a marriage from a death certificate and to take out laws that protect against discrimination. If they see that, they're not coming to here, folks. They're not going to go work at our companies. They're going to get as far away from a state they feel like is backwards as fast as they can. And do you know who led the effort to eliminate the part of the city charter in Cincinnati that in the 90s allowed for discrimination? A whole lot of citizens. HRC. Do you know who also led it? Procter & Gamble. Macy's. Because they were tired of having the topic come up in interviews when they were trying to recruit people. So this is a matter of law and constitution. It's also a matter, if we're going to compete in the 21st century, which means we've got to be competing as best we can to create a place that young, talented people want to be. We will never compete when we have elected officials like Mike DeWine literally scaring the heck out of all these people because it looks like all he wants to do is discriminate and all they want to do is go to a place that is proud of diversity and accepts everyone for who they are. So it's a huge issue for me, as you can tell. And the quicker, faster we get out of not just this marriage equality debate that Mike DeWine, the spectacle of what he's doing right now to this couple from Cincinnati, and the quicker we get out of politicians who literally are saying, I will fight anti-discrimination as hard as I can all over the state, the better off we'll be competing in the 21st century. Thanks.
Thank you for your presence here today, David. Like millennials, another issue that I think is being highly disregarded right now, and it kind of crosses jurisdictional lines between the federal government and here in Ohio, but I think like most people in this room, I'm kind of partial to clean drinking water. And just about a half a mile north of here, we have a lake.
Right.
And in August, we had about 500,000 of our friends in Toledo without clean drinking water. It reminded me kind of a scene from Haiti, watching relief workers hand out cases of bottled water to people. Now, the last time I checked, in August, I didn't see that toxic algae take the month of August off. And I assume that algae is still out there doing whatever toxic algae does, waiting probably for the next opportunity to bloom. And you still have phosphorus being poured into this lake. You still have fertilizer runoff. We know the problem. But the inactivity of the Ohio administration, from the governor's office down to the attorney general, the top law enforcement officer, speaks volumes, I think, about the regard for the Ohio citizenry. So I would love your comment about clean drinking water and what you can do as an attorney general to ensure that millennials have some clean drinking water, because I got a feeling it's not clean drinking water, they're not coming back to Ohio.
Right. No, I certainly agree with you. And I happened to be, I can't remember where I was. No, I was watching MSNBC, and the image of a couple of the hosts talking about it and talking about the water and saying the word yuck, which they did. We are all working as hard as we can for tourism, and that even forget even the impact on the local citizens, which was horrible. The image of that to the whole country, of Lake Erie being that dirty, probably erased millions of dollars of tourism and trying to get people to come here. And I think one of the jobs, the many jobs, there's so many issues this office can deal with. Everything from antitrust to consumer protection to seniors to veterans. One of the tragedies is that the current Attorney General uses it for only a few sliver of things. And Richard Cordray, he lost by 1 point in the worst year of Democratic turnout in decades, so I don't think that was a mandate against the kind of leadership he was showing. He led in every way. He wanted to protect citizens and use that job in a whole breadth of ways that the Attorney General right now doesn't do. So I haven't heard a thing out of him since that on the water. But one of the many responsibilities this job has is to fight for clean air and clean water. That's what the environmental section does. So like a lot of the issues I've talked about, we need someone who's proactive, doesn't just sort of put this away for the next time it's a crisis. I want to give a little symbolic story about this because I've been thinking about it a lot in the last couple days. There was the water crisis in Toledo took place that whole weekend. And not only was it a much bigger problem, there was also a lot of price gouging of people wanting water. And actually, Brad was with me. We called time out in the middle of that Saturday. We rented a U-Haul. We loaded it up with 4,000 water bottles, and we drove to Toledo, and we said, where do people need water? And we showed up at a school, and we stood there for 2 hours and passed out that water because it just seemed like the right thing to do. The gouging and all that, and the cars were coming at 11:30 at night. The gouging kept taking place till about 10 o'clock on the Monday when the mayor announced you can turn the water on again. At about 10:40, I see a press release from Mike DeWine. I'm going to Toledo to look for the gougers. He missed it by 40 minutes. The crisis was all weekend, and he didn't get there. He couldn't bother to get the staff up on the weekend to go deal with the fact that, of course, the gouging stopped once the water went back on, but boy, he was Johnny on the spot Monday. About 20 minutes after the crisis ended, he shows up to find the gougers. Now, that's symbolic, especially when this weekend he was filing briefs at the Supreme Court because early voting was going to start Tuesday. So he couldn't show up in Toledo in the middle of the crisis over the weekend. He shows up when the crisis is over. But here, the crisis of people voting Tuesday, he's all worked up and filing briefs to stop it just in time. That's priorities. And so bigger picture, that doesn't directly answer your question. Bigger picture, obviously, as the guy who represents Ohio EPA, I want to sit down and make sure that we're not just dealing with the short-term reactive stuff, but big picture, we're figuring out how it is that, and this is a long-term change. It's not going to be immediate. We can do a lot better. Because if we lose Lake Erie, and as someone from Cincinnati, I can tell you, I don't think we even market the Lake Erie nearly. I hear too much about Michigan, not enough about Lake Erie and Cincinnati. I get ads every day. Come to Michigan. This is an amazing resource. It's undervalued, and it's frankly undermarketed, but we obviously have to work very hard to make sure we keep it clean as well. That's my time. Thank you all very much. It's great to be with everybody. Thanks. Good to see you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here for our special forum with David Pepper, candidate for Ohio Attorney General for the Democratic Party. Our forum's now adjourned. Have a great day.